Hello, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us. Very big welcome to you from wherever you are in the world. So this is the first of our 6 planned webinars live from COP27. We've got passionate speakers, real views, latest updates. So today our focus is on nature-based solutions. What's possible with nature-based solutions? And we've got 2 absolutely top and passionate speakers on the subject. We've got Alistair Mullen, who's live from COP27. Now, there seem to be some technical issues with the communication links from Egypt, so we're going to have to, if you can bear with us in terms of the quality of the communications link. And then we've got Rob de Laet, and Rob's in Amsterdam, so we've got much better communication links to Amsterdam. So, Alistair, let's start off with you. Do you want to tell us about where you are in COP27? Where are you?
Yeah, so hello, everybody. My name is Alistair Mullen. I'm part of the Coalition for Rainforest Nations. And apologize for the noise. Hopefully you can hear me. This is our booth in the zone where all the governments are. So the Coalition is a 50-strong unit of rainforest nations. We're here hosted by EY, the corporate, with Papua New Guinea. It's the Coalition branding. I'm going to head into a meeting room where it's a bit quieter. But here we've got Papua New Guinea. Here we've got Gabon. That's the Minister, Lee White, speaking. Gabon are about to issue 90 million carbon credits, the largest ever issue of carbon credits, and we're going to be driving that sale for them. So this is the madness. Australia behind me, Saudi Arabia over there. All the nations of the world are in this zone or the zone in the tent next to us. I'm just going to head into a meeting.
Fantastic. So, Alistair, you head off into your meeting room. Meanwhile, let's ask Rob. Rob de Laet, would you like to give us a short introduction to yourself, Rob?
Thank you, Charles. Hello, everybody. So I'm basically a climate activist, and I've been doing so for the last 10 years or so, full-time, and in all kinds of fora. And looking at solutions to the climate crisis, more and more, I focused on the incredible power of nature to help us to get out of the crisis, specifically rainforests. Because basically, rainforests are the cooling organs of the planet. And like our bodies sweat and cool our bodies, so do a rainforest. Basically, they do that through the evaporation through their leaves, and cloud forming and rainmaking. So when you cut the forests, basically you're heating up the planet. And there was just a study coming out from the World Resource Institute the other week or so, which clearly shows that the world is waking up to the incredible power for the rainforest, especially to cool the planet. And it's not right now correctly in the models. It needs to be, the models need to be adapted to this amazing capacity, because the rainforests hold a key to the future of the planet. Thank you.
Great. So let's come back to you on that. So back over to Alistair in Egypt, if we may. So Antonio Guterres kicked off day one with a very, very tough message about the world facing a stark choice. So what's the feeling on the ground about this, Alistair? Is this tough message, the tough talk from Guterres, is this going to make a difference in practical negotiations? What's the sense of it on the ground here, Alistair?
A sense on the ground. Well, first of all, I'll echo Rob's comments, and thank you, Rob, for that learned introduction. 1.5 degrees best with the rainforests alone. If we don't save those, it's not going to happen. 3 or 4 degree world. So totally attest there. I think you have to take a step back. We're in COP, is it 27? We've had 26 before where nothing has been done for the planet. We really have to do it. I'm forever the optimist, but we have to put into context what has actually happened. So COPs are famous for rhetoric and no results. And we hope to be the antithesis of that. So all these leaders' declarations, these are politicians who come and go. We've had 4 in the UK in the last 4 or 5 years. So I don't put any credence behind that. It's really with the corporate world. So we've got the Paris Agreement, and can we deliver it? So that is the message that we're trying to do, the financial side of what Rob is talking about. So it's very simple. Rainforests need to be worth more standing than felled. We supported Bolsonaro. And I'll repeat that. We supported Bolsonaro chopping the rainforest down. People fall off their chairs when I say that. Brazil, for 10 years prior to Bolsonaro, had the best reduction in deforestation rates on the planet. I think they were down 70% from the peak. And nobody paid a penny for them. They got like $400 or $500 million from the global north. So very simply, the equation has to change. Yes, we have a change of government with Lula. That's great. But nothing changes other than we have to get the polluter to pay. So the job of the Coalition for Rainforest Nations is twofold. One is to bring these 50 plus nations together with one voice, which then becomes relatively powerful in the one vote, one system of the COP. However, the American one vote is not one vote. Then within that, most critical parties, we've had 5 or 10 countries already that have done amazing work, changed the total profile of deforestation around the country, and have not been paid a penny for it. So very simply, we have to get the corporate, the polluter, to pay. And I'm a capital markets banker by background. I spent my last 2 years in this role. A lot of sleepless nights. We're very close to bringing a product to market. It's the Africa COP. We have Gabon. Gabon are coming out with 90 million carbon removal credits. We have pretty much the whole voluntary market against us in this sale. We are Paris Agreement led, and it doesn't fit in with the project approach. So there's a lot of politics. There's a lot of people trying to derail what we're doing. I call it peak carbon. What is peak carbon? We're here to end cheap offsets. Cheap offsets are the biggest arbitrage on the corporate balance sheet in the world. What do I mean by that? When a corporate pollutes, and we know there's a lot of pollution out there, there's 50 gigatons a year, mainly corporates. When a corporate pollutes, it provides a negative cost to society of somewhere in the $100, $200, $300 per ton range. Buying that $5 or $10 offset does exactly what it does. It puts $10 in the till against a cost of $300. So I'm all for reducing, but that's absolutely fine. When we put offsets on the corporate balance sheet, they have to be at a fair value. So we prefer the term true zero rather than net zero. Net zero is an arbitrage. And if you think, just the final point I'll say is, if you want to quantify the problem, we have 50 gigatons of emissions in the world. 50 gig, I don't call it basically, I call it pollution, not emissions, right? So we have 50 gigatons of pollution in the world. If we charge that at $50 a ton, world corporate profits, 2.5 trillion, disappear. So let's be under no optical illusion it's going to be easy. But that tells me that the whole corporate structure is geared around destroying nature. So this is the complexity of the task we have. So it doesn't matter what world leaders say, largely. It's going to have to be down to corporate leaders, and where the world leaders can play a change, we need 3 things: activism, which is not the world leaders; regulation, that's where they have to change. So that's enough from other stuff. So very optimistic, but we're fighting an uphill battle.
So Alistair, thank you so much for that. Okay, so you packed so much into that. Let's just break that down a little bit so that people have got some of the key messages. So what you're saying is that you're part of a coalition of 50 rainforest nations. Okay, and you're saying that those countries at the moment, most of those countries are not being paid for the work they're doing to stop deforestation and to undertake reforestation. Yeah. Okay. So let's just understand one step at a time. What actually, with your project, what difference are you going to make? Why is it going to be different with what you're doing, Alistair?
Okay, good question. Thank you for that, Charles. So we sort of attest to, we're in a race against time. And I'm an ex-capital markets banker. And if a government wants to raise $10 billion, it will go to the capital markets with $10 billion and raise it in one shot, subject to its credit rating. It doesn't go to each village in that country and say, can you go to the capital markets and raise $10,000 each? Because that wouldn't work. That's what we have in the carbon markets currently, projects. With all the will in the world, projects don't work at a global scale, at the speed and scale we need to work at. What do I mean by that? There is only one way to stop deforestation, and that's by funded statutes. So the country has to legislate with enough money to push the legislation through that compensates down to the ground. So that's what we're talking. So that's why we're different. We only deal with that. We don't do projects. The project is called the government. So we've invented the sovereign carbon market. We have Deutsche Bank who've signed up with us. We have a press release. I might preempt it, but there is a press release with a major energy exchange going out today. Happens to be the home of the EUA. So it's the largest carbon exchange in the world. They're going to be partnering with us in sovereign carbon. Very exciting there. I hope they don't hear this. I think the press release is in half an hour's time. So we're putting this institutional product together, speed and scale, multi-gigatons of carbon removals coming out of it. And hand on heart, all the will in the world, projects ain't going to fix us.
Okay, right. So that what you're saying then is that the role of projects is much smaller scale. You're looking at things at a sovereign level where a government can make a difference. Okay. Now, you talked about the prices. You talked about prices of the cost of pollution of $50, $100 or more. So what are we talking about? What's the sort of price? What's the sort of price we're talking about for carbon in this world that you're selling here, Alistair?
The world of you've got two sides or three sides to the carbon pricing equation. You know, everything about climate science is about the science, apart from pricing, because the metric is let's let the markets dictate it. Those very same markets that cause the problem, those are the markets that price carbon at zero for 70 years and basically led us to the point of extinction. So the markets failed and they will continue to fail until we regulate a fair price for carbon. It's controversial, but it's not. So everything that we do is about the climate science until the one thing that really matters in a market-driven economy, the price. So we've got to deal with that. There's talk obviously of a global carbon price. I don't see it coming in the next 5 to 10 years. I hope it does. So then we get back to what is the marginal price of carbon for a country? You know, and for the rainforest countries, it's basically the cost of stopping what they do, chopping trees down, putting palm oil in or whatever in its place, and replacing it with forest stewardship. And if you take there is public information on Brazil. Brazil makes $50 billion a year from chopping down trees, you know, and planting it, soy plantations, palm oil. So until we can pay them $51 billion, we're not in a conversation with it. Yes, Lula might change that, but we have to understand the economics. So if you think about that.
So the $50 billion, let's convert that into what that means for the price of carbon. So in terms of the price of carbon, what's that mean in terms of what they need to be paid to stop chopping down the rainforest?
So you would have to pay Brazil $50 for 1 gigaton, and their current forests absorb roughly 2 gigatons a year, and they're chopping down 2 gigatons a year. So the 1 gigaton metric is quite apt. So this is the problem we have. We've got a whole load of projects that produce carbon very cheaply, but not in the right way. They're not at a national level.
Just help me with help everybody with the calculation. So we've got the $50 billion. 2 gigatons. So what's that as a price per ton?
Yes. So if you think of $50 per ton for 1 gigaton, which we could end up, that's the number that Brazil could sequester if we get things right at the minimum. That's the type of scale that we need to be doing. Now, the voluntary markets exist in 100 million tons, not even. So the markets currently are just nowhere near either the price or the quantity. And that's why we invented sovereign carbon.
Right. Well, look, let's recover from what you've been talking about, Alistair. Let's come back over to Rob. So Rob spends half his life living in Brazil. So Rob, what's your comment on Brazil? Do you agree with this sort of analysis from Alistair? And also with the new President Lula coming into Brazil, is this going to make a difference? So Rob, what's your take on this, please?
Thank you, Charles. Well, thank you, Alistair, for a brilliant analysis, which I really, really like. It's obvious that President Lula is going to push for a zero deforestation. And he has been very successful in earlier cabinets, especially with Marina Silva as the environmental minister, who is playing a role somehow in the background in the current movements as well. So in that sense, I'm optimistic, but I agree with Alistair, basically, that once we realize how important the rainforests are for to keep a balanced climate in the world has to pay up for it. And actually, Alistair has already mentioned the price. In Brazil, it should be $51 billion and more. And that's also, by the way, the kind of money where you see that, for instance, cattle farming right now in Brazil, you can flip the business case for keeping forests on there and maybe doing agroforestry and stuff like that. Roughly, when you're talking about $50 per ton of carbon credits. So then you have the economic model. But I'd like to add something more to the discussion here, because while right now a price of $5 is being floated and won't do anything to stop this, once especially the linchpins in the financial system, like the insurance companies and the pension funds, start to understand that all their assets basically are going down the drain, while if they invest in a regenerative economy and regenerating the planet and etc., then at that moment you also get the leverage within the financial system. I think that is one of the key points where it needs to be pushed. The governments will follow; they'll never lead. They will follow once the financial systems understand that it's actually in their best business interest to have the planet regenerated and the forest protected. Thank you.
Okay, so let's just put on the table to everybody something that's happened in the news. So what's in the news is that it was announced on Monday that there's going to be a forest and climate leaders partnership. The importance, there's the EU, 26 nations are part of this. So some countries are part of this, like the UK, Congo, Gabon, Indonesia, but for example, not Papua New Guinea. So what's a little bit unusual about this is that this coalition, this partnership, seems to be led by the US working with Ghana, which is an unusual combination. So what's happening here, Alistair? What's this about? What's going on with the US getting involved in this?
I mean, we have something called the Paris Agreement that the US try and forget. The Paris Agreement has been signed by 196 other nations, and it's basically set out under Article 6 the rules for a global carbon market. That doesn't fall under the control of the US. Very uncomfortable. So once again, another leaders pledge. Look at the Glasgow leaders pledge on deforestation. Absolutely zero has happened. Like maybe $1 billion has found its way into the market. I don't even think it has. I did some research the other day on leaders pledges. There have been 5 COP leaders pledges in the last 10 years on ending deforestation. The countries don't want to hear about it. The Paris Agreement is the vehicle. It's already set. Article 6 has been agreed on by 196 nations. Why does John Kerry need a new standard? They want to control the market. So, our nations are supporting it very broadly.
Okay, so you're saying that John Kerry is trying to introduce a new standard here. So I think that's new news. What's that? What can you say about that, Alistair?
Well, you've got a whole load of voluntary standards, the ACR, the FERRAs in this world, and Article 6 is basically where the UNFCCC will determine the standards under Article 6.4. So it's a bit of a technical debate, but the critical element here is we need one global standard for measuring carbon. Not 20, not 50, not 100, not John Kerry's version, not Mark Carney's version. We've already got the version, right? So we're Article 5.2 of the Paris Agreement. We've got a standard. It's called the REDD+ framework. That's obviously for forests. It exists. We have the whole world trying to fight us on it. It's tiring. We have people writing negative articles on us, disagreeing on commas and full stops in article decisions. It's tiring. So, hand on heart, we decided we're turning off to the noise. We have 50 nations, 10 are literally queuing up outside the door. We have put moratoriums in 7 countries. Guess what's happening? So the US and all their guys, they go in with project developers and steal carbon. Carbon is a sovereign asset now under Article 6. Would anybody in this call go into Saudi Arabia and drill for oil without asking the royal family? No, they wouldn't. They'd have their hands chopped off. Why is carbon any different? So we've got a whole stylistic debate. And guess what? If the US don't control the most valuable commodity in the world, that's carbon sequestration, but where are they in 20, 50 years' time? So this is what we have in the coalition. And as there was an article in The Guardian, Hans mentioned it earlier, we replaced the P of the C with OPEC. So think about the Organization for Carbon Exporting Countries. Think how powerful that could be if 50 rainforest nations got together and started selling their sequestration. That's possibly the most powerful movement in the New World Order. Guess who will not be a party to that? Our big friends in the US. And that's what we're fighting about.
Okay, let's bring in Rob to give your take on this, Rob. I mean, this is a big, complicated message here from Alistair. Can you help our audience to understand this a bit clearer?
Well, thank you, Alistair, again for a brilliant analysis. But let me first say that if things look too complicated for the larger audience to understand, then they are made too complicated, and then you will never get the traction that you need. And although I do understand the systemics of the REDD+, which is basically a first iteration of what we need, we now need to accelerate this system, and that can only be done by digitalizing the process and by not making it so bureaucratic as it is right now. Because in a sense, that humanity will finally maybe go into collapse writing huge reports about how to do things, but in the end the number of actions is not enough. And the REDD+ protocols and what have you right now simply don't have the systems in place to accelerate and to bring money on the ground to the people who really need it in sufficient quantities. So while I do understand the reasoning behind REDD+, I think it is very, very important to make an agile system that can become very, very fast accelerated.
Okay, well, I want to talk to, before you all go, I want to talk to you a little bit specifically about the prices. But Alistair, you've got a point here that Rob's making, which is that REDD+ is too complicated. What's your take on that? Why is REDD+ the right way to go?
Well, REDD+ is the first. Let's take a step back. And I do agree with a lot of Rob's comments, but what's the alternative out there? So number one, we've got a license to trade air, trade thin air. That's what carbon dioxide is, right? So that is not easy. It's an investment banker's dream, right? I would argue that 60–80% of credits in the voluntary market are slightly dubious, let's say. We've got a lot of avoidance credits. We can't avoid our way to 1.5 degrees. We can only reduce and remove. So the world is moving to NDC balance sheets. So governments are going to obviously have to put in their NDCs. We're moving to 5-year stock takes, moving to this whole new economic cycle. Now, if anybody's got anything better than REDD+ and REDD+, I'm all ears. It's complex. We know it's taken 15 years to create. We've got 9 million. We've got basically a gigaton of credits to sell. We currently have no buyers. So guess what? The countries aren't getting funded. So with respect to Rob, we have a prototype that's bloody good. It's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. There's nothing better. And for this is forestry for other sectors, because we have to decarbonize nationally via the NDC process. So we can either go off and have orthogonal measures in project land, or we can actually work with an NDC system, again, voted for by 196 countries, with a protocol that already exists, a protocol that needs taking to other countries. Can we speed it up? Categorically, yes. But hand on heart, we have a product that's a prototype, we've got a gigaton to sell, and there are no buyers. Why? Because guess what? The regulation isn't there to force them to buy.
So, okay, so this is a pretty serious situation then. You've got a gigaton of carbon to sell, which is $50 a ton is worth, what, $50 billion? Is that the maths? So what needs to happen?
So when I say, well, it's critical. So when I say there are no buyers, some buyers, but I'm using it in extremis. So we have 50 gigatons of emissions. 25% falls under an ETS. So I call it hedged. It's hedged at the wrong price, but it's in a system. The voluntary carbon market has done a good job in trying to get corporates to put carbon on balance sheet. 0.2% of the world's emissions are covered or retired in that market. They're talking about scaling it tenfold. That's 2%. That's close to zero. So we've got 75% of the world's emissions are sitting there floating for free. So the emissions are out there. The buyers to offset are not out there yet. Why? Because they've had it for free for 70 years.
Yeah.
So the one thing that governments can do is force this product on balance sheet, and whether it be a tax, whether it be an offset, that's going to be nuanced. But until we drive regulatory change, we're going to always be fighting the rearguard action.
Okay, so as someone who was listening to Guterres talk on Monday saying the world's got a problem, you and Rob have got solutions to this, and what I'm hearing is that your solution basically is stuck because the UN, the world, has not yet put in place the right regulatory framework. So what's that framework? Alistair, that's going to make a difference, and any chance of getting that agreed in the next week here in Sharm el-Sheikh?
Not even on the agenda, so that's zero on that one. I mean, you know, we have to put it into perspective and challenge each and every single one of us. We have a cost of living crisis. We have democracies generally in the democratic world that operate in 4-year, 5-year cycles, political cycles. No politician whatsoever is going to impose the cost short term that will be needed from the right carbon price. Nobody in the world will do that. They will be out of office instantly. So that's the challenge we face. You know, world corporate profits, as I told you earlier, are a function of destroying nature. 100% of world corporate profits are against nature. So, you know, this is not going to be easy. I don't have the complete solution, but we have to work on a system that we have to get to the right carbon price and give a 10-year warning that we're going to accrete to that carbon price and put carbon on balance sheet. So my solution would be carbon needs to go on balance sheet globally, certainly starting with G10 at the right. It needs to do two things. It needs to go on balance sheet, and it needs to go on balance sheet at the right price.
And the right price for you is the $50?
Well, as I said earlier, if you put $50 on right away today, world corporate profits disappear. You know, so kind of have to be a realist. We've got to start somewhere, and yeah, somewhere between $25 and $50, and we accrete to. Bearing in mind the forward curve is forever steep, so if it's not 50 as a static number, you know, 2030 that 50 needs to be 100 or 150. So we're fighting a race against time.
Okay.
Well, can I weigh in here? Because from the current structure of the economy, of course, Alistair is correct. But if you invest your bucks in a regenerative economy, then you will get paid because the carbon credits are going up in price. And let me add one more thing. I mean, it's clearer and clearer that the sole carbon focus is not working, and the whole cooling systems that forests and vegetation in general provide to a balanced climate need to come into the models, and when those come into the models, suddenly rainforests become 3, 4, 5 times more powerful as a cooling agent, not just a carbon sequestration agent.
So, Alistair, I know you've got to go. We can talk a little bit more with Rob. So, Alistair, some final words from you. What would you have to say to us and our audience here?
I would say optimism. We you know, humans have survived a long time, obviously a lot longer than anybody on this call. We're forever innovating. We have to challenge ourselves. If we lose optimism, we die. We have these beautiful assets that I'm privileged to be, you know, very much in the inner sanctum of with the Coalition for Rainforest Nations. We've got the investment banks starting to look at this, rubber tested to the, you know, the corporate world, the institutional world, needing to start valuing nature. They're doing that. So let's leave it that the glass is 3/4 full. And I'm optimistic, and the more people that we have buying in, the more things like you do, Charles, let's just keep doing it, and we'll win the battle.
Well, thank you so much, Alistair. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for giving your valuable time. And let's hope that you can now be so inspired by us that you'll go off and make that $1 billion sale later in the day.
Take care, everybody. Love to all.
Okay. Thanks, Alistair. Thank you. So, Rob, wow, just recovering from Alistair's view of the world here. What should have done earlier was to invite you to talk about your project, because you spent half your life in Brazil. You have a project. It's about removing CO2 emissions, so it fits with what Alistair is talking about. And so tell us more about what your view of the world is in terms of what's possible with projects like yours in Brazil.
Thank you, Charles. Well, I've been basically for about a decade, I have been reforesting a small rainforest valley in Brazil, not in the Amazon, it's in the other rainforest, the Atlantic rainforest. And to my amazement, I didn't realize nature would A, come back so quickly with little help, B, that the water situation in the valley would improve so fast, because we had a lot of droughts, and just by a few slight measurements measures, the valley became much wetter compared to the region. So in the last drought that struck the region, this small valley was the only one where water was still coming out of springs. And it gets cooler. I didn't measure it, but I heard that that people that come and visit my valley always say that it's more cool than a mile down the road. So restoring the microclimate, and everybody knows this. I mean, everybody knows that if you sit under a tree, it's cooler than if you sit next to it in the sun. I mean, this is not rocket science. Now, if everybody globally would start to regenerate their own backyard, their own regions, and I'm talking protecting forest and vegetation, reforesting, and doing a transition to sustainable food production, you see immediate effects in the microclimate. Well, guess what? 1 billion times a microclimate is a macroclimate. And let me tell you one more thing. The science right now is starting to become clearer and clearer that the whole process of evaporation through tree leaves is such a powerful cooling effect that is nowhere represented in the climate models right now, but is a game changer once you see the total effect of it. So now I'm going back to my specific project in the Amazon rainforest. After talking to several top scientists who introduced the discovery of what is called the biotic pump, we realized that there are more strategic places in the world to reforest and less strategic ones. The biotic pump, let me explain roughly what it is. Basically, because of this vertical movement of evaporation through leaves, the vapor goes up and then recondenses into clouds and rain. In that process, you have to understand a liter. You all know, if you want to put up the kettle to make tea, you need a hell of a lot of energy to evaporate that. That energy is actually taken by the leaves from the sun to evaporate and take heat out into the outer atmosphere. Now, once it's up there, when it recondenses, two things happen. One is that heat that was in these molecules dissipates in the form of photons, and half of that leaves the atmosphere. So that's latent heat actually exiting the planet, and that's an immediate cooling effect. The second one is that if you boil a liter of water, it becomes roughly 1,000 liters of vapor at 1 atmosphere, which means that you have an enormous expansion. Now, when it recondensates, it goes back, and you get a low pressure effect, and that draws in air from around it. So forests don't only create clouds, they don't only create rain, they also create wind because of the recondensation. Now, if you do that next to the oceans, if there's big forest, evaporating forests and making clouds, it actually sucks in humid air from the sea. And this is where what we call the biotic pump starts. It basically irrigates, but it also moves over land. And an average drop in the Amazon rainforest, once it has been evaporated by the forest once and falls back as rain, falls 6 to 7 times all the way going through that whole cycle of that forest. So the project where I am focusing is on the place where the Amazon rainforest meets the Atlantic Ocean in the northeast of Brazil, where most of the forest has been cut. If you would put back forest there, if I had a magic wand tomorrow and there would be a full-grown forest there, the area would get more irrigation from the ocean again. So basically what you're doing is you rehydrate the land masses, because we're not suffering right now just 1.2 degrees warming on a global scale. No, the worst impact is that we're drying out our lands by land use change and mismanagement of lands. Once we rehydrate the land masses, all of them, Africa, Eurasia, North America, then we will get less droughts, we will get less heat waves, and funny enough, we'll also get less extreme rain events, because forests actually, they not just evaporate rain, they also put small aerosols with it up that are exactly the right form to get the right kind of nuclei to form rain. So they're actually perfect rainmakers. So the rain that falls down falls in a gentle way, and not wait until the sky is super saturated and falls back as an enormous amount and then rushes off. So once the world understands that healthy biomes are actually the real elements that make a balanced climate, then our whole discussion will become different.
Okay, Rob. So look, I'm going to ask you to come back in a minute and talk a little bit about some numbers for your project in Brazil. But I just really want to reflect to everybody on the point about the trees, the shade provided by the trees. So we've got a tree in our garden, and obviously in the UK, if you're not based in the UK, we had actually the hottest summer ever in the UK, and in our garden it was 36 degrees, so it was 40 degrees in places in the UK. And at that point, when it's as hot as that, you really want to be sitting under a sun umbrella or sit under a natural tree. And of course, when you think about it, what that tree is doing, okay, a tree can come to a point when it just dries out. So if you have months of no rain, no water, then the tree will just dry out, the leaves will fall off. But in normal circumstances, that tree will hold up, the leaves will be there. And every day, day in, day out, for 12 or more hours a day, those leaves are absorbing the energy of the sunshine. They're keeping the sun off me. I'm sitting under the tree, they're keeping the sun off the ground underneath it, they're stopping it drying out. And this amazing impact is being done by the tree. And so clearly, if you then take the tree away, then you have to sit in the sun, and all that energy is going into the ground, it's drying it out, it's stopping the rain, stopping the water, stopping that whole cycle. So this is intuitive. We can all see this in our own gardens, even in the UK. But let's round this off, Rob, by talking about some numbers. So you're talking about a project rather than about a sovereign project for the whole of Brazil. You're talking about this positive context of the new President Lula coming in to Brazil starting on the 1st of January. So with the sort of project you're talking about, tell us a little bit about the numbers and what impact what difference it can make.
Well, thanks to you, Charles, and now CO2. We're now working on a project to plant 16 million trees together with the Guajajara in an indigenous territory, exactly in the area where we should be able to get that biotic pump function of the Amazon forest improved. And it's a good start. It needs to be a lot more, but in that specific area in the northeast, working with the indigenous people who really want to protect their forest and want their destroyed forest back, those are some of the most crucial places where, if we reforest it with millions and millions of trees, hundreds of millions in the end, we'll actually see the whole of the Amazon rainforest bounce back, because it gets more moisture, and the trees will revive, and they actually will also sequestrate a lot more carbon in the process. So it's like an acupuncture point to basically heal the current destruction of the Amazon rainforest, because it's at the tipping point of dying back by itself. And if we don't stop that between a couple of decades, most of it will actually have turned into savanna and won't have that pumping mechanism, that rehydrating mechanism anymore, and it dries up a whole continent, but it even dries out parts of the United States because that moisture is not moving up to the US East Coast anymore, West Coast, sorry.
So Rob, thank you so much for that. So just to put numbers on it, we're looking at around $7 million for 16 million trees, which will transform the lives of thousands of people in the indigenous communities in this area of Brazil who currently live in extreme poverty. So over to Gary, Rihanna and Hannah. So you've heard the discussion, very sophisticated, amazing discussion here with Alistair and Rob. Are there any questions that you
and push it out to the audience, Charles?
would like to ask? Yeah,
pushing it out to the audience. If anyone has any thing in the chat, if Rihanna can see, Samantha says, fantastic project. Just want to say trees also hold the land together, help to prevent landslides. So thank you for that. But any comments just in the tail end of this live from the audience, or if you're watching this on social media, please share. The way that social media works is once you share and make a comment, all your friends see. This is a humongous task we have ahead of us.
So Gary, any questions from yourself?
Yeah, for me is that do we think we're going to make progress at COP is front of mind. But for both of you, really, what would you like if you had your magic wand? What 2 or 3 things would you like to see progress and agreed? And not just agreed, because Paris, we agreed a lot and nothing was implemented. What would you both do? If you had a magic wand, what would be your 2 or 3 wishes that you'd like implemented as well as agreed?
So Rob, after you, okay?
Well, thank you. Gary, that's a wonderful question. Well, the first one is very simple, a moratorium on cutting prime forests worldwide now. Not 2030, now. That's the first rule. The second one is then make sufficient finance available to regenerate lands and forest areas around the world to the size of roughly 1 billion hectares, which is roughly something the size of China or the United States. But if you actually, people always say, well, that's a lot of land. And of course it is. Still, China is around 6 or 7% of the global landmass. So it's not completely out of the ordinary. And actually the world was like that. And then all those forests will again have that cooling effect, and not only cooling, also that calming effect on the weather. Because large forests do not allow for droughts, heat waves, or flash floods. All of these things will diminish in power, and those are the real problems right now affecting the world. A lot of people from Pakistan to where have you are the Horn of Africa are suffering these extremes, and is impacting the world's food situation, because we're not very far off where the world is going to produce less food than we need for 8 billion people because of the drying out of this thing. And we can reverse that with forests, new forests. Thank you. Okay,
so Gary, great question. I think for me, we heard from Alistair talking earlier about the opportunity of the trees being the new OPEC for the world. And I think that what I want to see is I want to see the world coming together. I want to see a world where we are cooperating rather than arguing about this stuff, where we pay for pollution, which is what Alistair talked about earlier, and that we use the world's mechanisms to raise the money to pay for the trees with the carbon offsets. It's so critically important. And put it in context, trees have got the potential to remove around 1/3 of CO2 emissions from the planet. So important that.
Rihanna, would you? Sorry, we've got lots of questions coming in, and for the or comments. Rihanna or Hannah, would you read those? Are they coming in thick and fast? How are we doing on the?
Yeah, Stephen said, what kind of positive signs do you expect for forest protection, reforestation, and in general on climate change policies before the end of this COP?
Well, I think what we've heard, Rob, you said it. We need a moratorium now on cutting forests. So that's something that's very straightforward. It's in line with a lot of these pledges that have been talked about. Let's ask for it now, yeah?
Samantha said, I don't know if you wanted to.
No, I just say it's probably not in the cards. I mean, Alistair is fighting the good fight over there, but I doubt if that will be an outcome. Of course, it will be wonderful. Let's see.
Samantha said optimism. People want to be able to see what their own personal carbon footprint are.
Okay. So Samantha, for me, there's a lot of calculators out there, and you can complete the calculators if you want. I mean, for me, it depends where you live. If you live in the UK, then the emissions per person are around 7 tons of CO2 per person. If you live in the US or Canada, it's going to be around 16 tons per person. What I would say is just make a judgment about how much CO2 you're using, how big a house you live in, how much CO2 you're using, creating, how much air travel you do. And if you want to do something about it, then absolutely plant some trees. So to remove 7 tons of CO2, you need to plant 1,750 trees, and those trees will then happily remove that 7 tons of CO2 for every year the trees are growing. So take a look on the No CO2 website, noco2.org. Under donate, you can see the current price to plant that number of trees. Don't be intimidated by the numbers. Plant what numbers you can. And it all makes a difference. We've planted 1.5 million trees so far. I wish we planted a lot more. Rob's numbers of 1 billion hectares translate, I think, into about the 1 trillion trees that the world needs. So we need 1 trillion trees. There's 7 billion people. If we all plant some trees, it will certainly make a difference, and particularly if us people in the West plant more trees.
Well said, Charles. Is there any more questions coming from the audience or comments?
Not yet, no.
Our next live broadcast, I just want to say, please tune in. It's the same link. When is the next broadcast? Tomorrow?
The broadcast is tomorrow. Tomorrow, hopefully, we're going to be talking about renewable energy. We're going to be talking about the $100 billion that's supposed to be provided by the West. And then on Friday this week at the same time, we're back with Rob with another couple of absolute climate experts. So look forward to that. Please join us. Please join us on both days if you can, and then we're here next week.
Tell a friend. Charles, I just want to acknowledge you and you, Rob, for showing up today and driving this forward. If it wasn't for people like you, we would be really in big trouble. You are the North Star of this. So really thank you to the audience too. Anyone that's tuned in today, anyone that is waving the flag, really, it's going to take quite a lot of energy to get to where we need to be. So thank you all very, very, very much. Look, we appreciate all the love emojis on the side. That's keep that up. It's great for spirit. Please share this. This will be available again for a rewind if you've missed it, but we hope to meet you tomorrow.
So thank you to everybody. Thank you to our audience. Big thank you to Rob for speaking today, and big thank you, Gary, to you and your team, Rihanna, Hannah, and yourself for making this possible. Thank you, Gary. Thank you, everybody.
A great day, everyone.
See you
Friday.
See you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.